Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I want to give you guys kind of like a patch review for the Bazaar. We had a massive patch. I know I looked over the patch notes and all that, but I looked over the patch notes before I could play the game. So now that I have played the game, I've played for two full days, and I've done quite a bit of research on what is working. I want to update you guys kind of like a meta report, at least preliminary. From what I have seen though in the Bazaar, typically the meta doesn't evolve as much as things are added into it. So it's something to keep in mind. Probably everything I say is going to remain relevant unless they start removing some cards, which I think they might. Generally, this season has been quite interesting because we've had kind of like a new breakdown of the level up rewards, and I did post an image on my social media in regards to this, so some of you guys have been wondering what is up with that. So it is this thing here. So basically the level up rewards are set. It is just bronze skill level 2, bronze item, loot other item, silver skill, and basically what you have is a system where there are some very good level up rewards and there are some very mediocre level up rewards. And if you are aware of when these things happen, you can actually play the game much better than normal because you can push really aggressively for certain breakpoints, and other level up breakpoints are pretty much like not anything. Like you're going to have some level rewards where there are skills, and you have some level rewards that are just like, here's 4 gold. And then your other rewards are like, well, enchant an item. The enchanted item is level 10 now, which is actually crazy. Getting level 10 is a huge milestone in power. The skills got redesigned that you get most of them from level up rewards. There are still skill vendors. Now, the skill vendors are super premium. In my opinion, if you see a skill vendor of even a skill category that you don't use, just do it. Just go get it. The Grandmaster that gives you a copy of a skill so you can kind of like level it up. It actually gives you copies of the skills that you have, so that can be really strong as well. Anything skill related, just go. The skills are also much more expensive, unless, of course, you get them from the level up reward, which means that the economy angle needs to be utilized pretty well. Now, from what I have seen, the consistency in the early few days means that you can do the mushroom event to get a random skill. It's kind of like you start with a skill, as we did like a few patches back. You kind of make your build warped around that. On day 2, if you get the, escort through the mountain path event, try to go 2 income. If you can get 2 income on day 2, it should be enough to afford some of the really powerful skills later on. Pick your levels ups, pick your battles. Generally, in terms of actual builds, the main thing that we've seen this patch are there's a lot of items that have charge effects, and probably the most notable one is the proboscis. Now, proboscis or proboscis, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. It's kind of like the mosquito thing. Now, this item is now a when you slow charges 1, 2, 3, 4, and it also has a cooldown of 4 seconds. This means that if you get it at diamond, its cooldown fully refreshes, which is absolutely crazy. There are lots of slow triggers. You can even enchant it with slow, which is actually fairly likely because on level 10 you get to choose 3 enchant, which is crazy because it doesn't include shiny and okay, I guess it doesn't include like golden and stuff, but it can't be golden. So basically, and icy is really rare. I've actually never even had one or seen an icy proboscis. So the chance that you actually get a heavy proboscis is actually pretty good. And if you get a heavy proboscis at diamond, it just infinitely loops, which is crazy. And if you get it at gold, you can usually make it work also because there are like ways to reduce the cooldowns of items. Even though the monster loot options are much rarer than before, it does present you with more options to get other stuff. The Finn's dig site, for example, you get the item for free, so you can more aggressively dig for items of other classes. And that puts you in a situation where, yes, you can usually get the cooldown of at least one item focused down, at about 25% of its original. That is actually fairly reasonable. So again, you only need like a gold proboscis, and you have an infinitely triggering weapon in many of your games. Now, I'm not just pointing out that this is the one holy grail of the game. There's actually lots of items that work like this. I'm pointing out this one because it's very consistent, because you can get it on Kurio's vendor. It's very common. You can get it from any of the mosquito encounters, not just the one on day 2, which means that you should pretty much always go for the mosquito encounter. And you can just get it as a random item from like the dig event or a few others. So the opportunity to actually encounter this item in any given run is actually fairly high, and it's a neutral item. So Pig has tons of these items that can cycle by themselves. Bushel is back. Bushel's probably the most meta one because the mushroom event now levels the Bushel, and Bushel at Diamond is a 4-second cooldown heal item, and when you shield it at Diamond, it charges 4 seconds, its entire cooldown. This is really significant because you can level the Bushel specifically faster than pretty much any other item in the early game, because the mushroom event gives you the hidden option of leveling your Bushel. Okay, and if you enchant the Bushel with Shielded, it is an infinitely looping healed plus shield item, and you guys know with Pig that's just absolutely bonkers. Pig has many of items that charge. Some of them charge wholly. Some of them only charge like a little bit or halfway. But if you have a full board of charging items, you basically have multiple infinity loops. It's kind of like playing Duly in previous patches, but now you can do it as Pig, actually much more easily than before. And that's kind of like one of the weird things about it for me this patch, that we have infinity looping Pig builds like almost every single run. You can do like infinity looping Vanessa builds. Vanessa has so many items as well, kind of like Pig. They're more weapon focused, but still they are pretty crazy. Like you can infinitely loop a Treb with one item, for example, which is insane. The Treb after bronze tier goes down to 8-second cooldown, and at Diamond it is charge 4 when you use a weapon or haste. So that's just crazy. It's very easy to satisfy that requirement. It's very easy to loop a Trebuchet, and you guys probably know Trebuchets do a lot of damage. Basically, we have mega infinity Pig builds, we have mega infinity Vanessa builds, we have Proboscis, and a few other neutral items that can go infinity pretty easily. And Duly, formerly the infinity combo hero, basically gets nothing. Yes. Not really sure how that worked out, because that was kind of the defining thing for Duly. Duly received a few buffs to a few of these items, but generally speaking, it's really hard to get a full infinity loop on Duly. The cores are kind of like laughable. Like if you look at any of the cores and compare them to like Bushel, it just doesn't compare. You have to spend your entire board to actually have like a looping engine with a core, with multiple upgrades, with multiple like cooldown reduction mechanisms, with the fastest items you can possibly get. You can get like a near infinite looping core. Now, I'm like, oh, well, what's the problem then? Well, you spend your whole build to do it, and because it's reliant on pretty much all of the items functioning, if your opponent can do like a freeze effect, well, it's no longer infinite looping. With Pig, you can have so many infinite loops that if you're hit with a freeze or an item destroy, it's actually fine most of the time. It's so infinitely looping that you really can't get countered very well. So it is a bit of a sorry state for Duly when it comes to the class identity. It's also pretty strange because the best item that actually caused infinity loop situations for Duly was the fiber optics, and despite the fact that they brought back almost all the items they removed in previous patches and added a few more, the only one that they didn't add back is fiber optics, which is the best item for looping Duly builds. So that's also pretty bizarre. It is a pretty rough time for Duly, but there are still a few builds that I think can do pretty well. And Duly, honestly, you want to introduce like Proboscis and any kind of item you get cross-class as much as you can into your builds, because they can activate crazy infinite loops, and because you're using the core, you can be heavily rewarded for it. Now, with everyone running infinity loops, let's talk about counters. How do you beat people that are infinitely looping? The best way is obviously, freeze. You just freeze some of them. And that can work if you have lots of freeze effects, but right now it's pretty hard to have lots of freeze effects. Actually, it's kind of hard to have any freeze effects. We also have a new counter. We have the freezing thaw or something. It's like a skill. When you get hit with a freeze, reduce it by a certain value. That value is pretty high, and that skill skill shows up as early as silver. It's very common at gold. It's still on the Jack-o'-lantern hero. I don't know, it's called Jack the Jacko or something like that. So you can get it from the monster event, and it is a skill of all heroes. So Duly can get it, Vanessa can get it, Pig can get it. It's very, very common. It's a freeze skill, and it starts at silver, and the silver skill pool is actually relatively small. So if you get this skill at silver, you're super resistant to freeze. If you get it at gold, you're super resistant to freeze. And if you get it at diamond, you're basically immune to almost every single form of freeze. Now, this skill does have an internal cooldown. So if you get like all your items frozen at once, it does like internal cooldown zap each one. Just be aware of that. But obviously, it's a ridiculously powerful skill. Certainly one that I highly recommend. Honestly, it might be the best overall skill in the game. We'll talk about a few others in a second here. Another thing you can do to counter the infinity loops is Iceberg. Iceberg is a Vanessa Diamond property, but it is on the Frost Street Champion that you can get it from a monster event. Again, you're also going to be digging in the Finn's dig site quite a lot. And again, they changed the dig site event, so when you find an item that you want, the reroll still costs gold, and you're going to reroll a lot in some cases. But when you find an item you want, it doesn't cost anything. So if you see like an Iceberg in Finn's dig site, it's not like minus 48 gold or minus 96 if it's enchanted, right? You just get it easy, right? So that's pretty sweet also. Just keep in mind, the freezing thaw skill completely nullifies Iceberg. Iceberg also triggers based on an internal cooldown, and it is absolutely void if they have the thawing skill. A little bit unfortunate. It does make it so Iceberg is a counter to the meta, but it's not infallible. One of the most affected counters are the abilities and the items that increase cooldowns for your opponent. I think these are overall the best counters because they start and are basically ongoing right from the start of a combat. So we're talking about Fort. Fort can increase the cooldowns of your opponent's items by 2 seconds. Vanessa has like the looking glass, the spy glass or something, which only affects one item, but again, it affects it at the start of combat, so it can kind of like interrupt some loops. Spy glass is not that good, but there's just not that many of these items. We also have the Chronosphere for Duly. Honestly, I haven't even seen Chronosphere in any of my games in 2 days, so it's pretty rare. We also have the Bonk skill. It is probably worth pursuing the Bonk skill whenever you see the monster with it. Just be alert that it might not actually work because it being only 1 second and many of these items looping more than their entire cooldown, sometimes it might do absolutely nothing. Sometimes it might just slow the effectiveness of the loops a little bit. Nevertheless, Bonk is still an incredibly good counter to the current meta. Another option that I think is pretty available is item destruction. I don't think it's the best option against some of these because a lot of the time your item destroy will be a little bit too late. Like if they're playing an infinitely looping thing with, let's say like a matchbox, you might have like 1,000 burn on you before you kill their matchbox and ruin their combo. You're just probably going to die to 1,000 burn. So, it doesn't really matter that you destroyed their item. So that's a little bit wonky. It's more of a thing with Duly because Duly can do like a little bit of control. Maybe you can get a chrono. Maybe you can get double item destruction. And also Duly doesn't have that many combo options as the other heroes. So it also, of course, depends on the hero as well. Overall, I've had quite a lot of fun in this patch. It's been really refreshing. I think most people that haven't played a lot of Bazaar will really enjoy this patch because you can really explore what makes Bazaar really awesome, which is making cool builds where a lot of things interact with one another. On the flip side, I think the charge items are way too overpowered. Like if you think about it, like Pufferfish, for example, is back. Now, Pufferfish at bronze, it kind of sucks. At silver, it kind of sucks. At gold, it's pretty good. But at diamond, it's literally the same Pufferfish that they had to remove from the game in like a day in the previous patch. It's an 8-second cooldown, and then when you haste, it's a charge 4. So it's literally the same. Now, obviously, it's not as consistent that you get a diamond Pufferfish as you had a bronze Pufferfish in that patch, so maybe they won't remove it. The thing is, it's just not Pufferfish. it's pufferfish, it's the pearl, it's the turtle shell, it's the astrolabe, it's like 10 different pig items. So the chance that you actually land on one of these, like yo-yo for example, is like the original. It's actually better than the original yo-yo. It's 4-second cooldown. It started at 8, and when you use an adjacent, it doesn't use the yo-yo, but it's charge 4. So it is use the yo-yo. So it's actually better than the original yo-yo that was like crazy. Like, again, had to be removed from the game for balance reasons. They introduced all these items back. So I think the mechanics are good, but I think the tuning is a little bit off. I'm curious to see where this meta leads, but it is something to be aware of, that some of these builds are just going to be like borderline unbeatable. There's also a skill that probably needs to be removed pretty quickly. It's called Shield Bash, and it reduces the cooldown of a weapon by 1 second when your opponent uses a non-weapon item. This means that you can instantaneously chain like a giant super slow weapon, and it's just like insanely unfair. So there's a few of these things, and the overall effect is that there's just not much consistency. In every Bazaar patch before this one, if I had like a really, really strong build, well, I would be confident that I would get like 9 or 10 wins. In this patch, you can have the strongest build you've ever played, and you can get 5 wins. Because, well, you might just run up against 2 or 3 people in a row with Shield Bash. You might have like the craziest like counter with like, let's say you have Fort and Iceberg. Well, they can just have overly overlapping charging abilities, so they don't care about your fort, and they can have the thawing skill, which is not that rare, to completely nullify your iceberg, and your chance to win is 0. So it is kind of polarizing in that sense for the people out there chasing 10 wins every single time, and unfortunately, I am in that bucket as well. You kind of have to be prepared for frustrations in this patch. But otherwise, it's pretty cool. And once again, even though there will be some frustrations until they iron out some of the issues, I do kind of want to pay my respects to their dev team, because they've made just really massive changes. Once again, they show us that they are not afraid to make sweeping changes in their game. And yes, it isn't a closed beta state, but nevertheless, it's not really something I've seen in other video games. And I hope at the very end of this journey of trying all these crazy things, we end up in a really good version of the game, because I've loved playing Bazaar. And if you're watching this video all the way through to this point, I guess you're in the same boat. So hopefully we're aligned in our opinion, and thank you for watching.